What's up, guys? This is Matt Singer from ScreenCrush.com, and today we're counting down the top 5 Batman movies that were never made. Over the course of 70 years, the Caped Crusader has made many appearances on the silver screen in many forms. But for every finished Batman movie, there's one or two that never quite got off the ground. Abandoned screenplays that were dropped in favor of other ideas, or transformed so completely that the finished product was unrecognizable from its original concept. Let's count down the top 5 most notable cinematic Bat-tastrophes, starting with number 5, The Batman by Tom Mankiewicz. It's hard to believe now, when Batman is one of the most bankable characters in all of moviedom, but after the cancellation of the 1960s Batman TV show, The Dark Knight was considered box office poison. I can't imagine why.
Holy sardine!
Yes. Anyway, 60s Batman was so campy that it basically convinced Hollywood that that's all Batman was, silly and over the top. When future Batman movie producer Michael Uslan first tried pitching the property around to movie studios, the only interested company was CBS, who wanted to make Batman in outer space. Holy terrible concept, Batman! Eventually, Uslan would team up with Tim Burton and give us the 1989 Michael Keaton Batman movie we know and love, but it took him a decade of development to get there. Along the way, he spent years trying to shoot a script called The Batman by Superman screenwriter Tom Mankiewicz. Inspired by the detective comic stories of Steve Englehart and Marshall Rogers, Mankiewicz's script retold a variation of the classic Batman origin story, and then featured Batman and Robin teaming up to take down the Joker. Even stranger than the strange apparitions involved, the actors considered to play Batman in the mid-1980s. According to the Los Angeles Times, they included Pierce Brosnan, Charlie Sheen, and Bill Murray?
Is this true?
Yes, it's true. This man has no dick.
That wasn't called for at all. At various points in the project's development, Mankiewicz's script fell into the hands of directors like Joe Dante and Ivan Reitman. Things finally started to come together when Uslan hooked up with Burton. And the rest, as they say, is history. But can you imagine? Bill Murray's Batman? If the internet had been around back then, there's only one way to describe what its reaction to that news would have been.
Human sacrifice, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria.
Exactly. Next up, number 4, Batman Unchained. Alright, so Tim Burton makes Batman and Batman Returns, and then Joel Schumacher comes in and makes Batman Forever and Batman and Robin. And then, as production on Batman and Robin begins winding down, Warner Brothers started looking ahead to a potential 5th film in the franchise. Schumacher was still interested in directing, but since by this point in the franchise Batman looked like this,
Hi, Freeze. I'm Batman.
he thought it was maybe time to make The Dark Knight just a wee bit darker. And so in the spring of 1997, Warner Brothers hired Mark Protasiewicz to figure out what that would look like. He came up with a concept called Batman Unchained, sometimes referred to online as Batman Triumphant, although Protasiewicz told The Hollywood Reporter that he never called it that and has no idea where that idea came from, about the Caped Crusader facing off with Scarecrow and Harley Quinn, who in this version would have been the Joker's daughter out for revenge against the man who killed her dad. The two villains figure out Batman's secret identity and then team up to drive Bruce Wayne insane. After he's committed to Arkham Asylum, the movie would have climaxed with a crazy hallucination, where all the previous villains from the series, including Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman and Jack Nicholson's Joker, would have made cameos and put Batman on trial. Protasiewicz's 150-page script dove deeply into Bruce Wayne's psyche, exploring his darkest fears and desires. And things were looking pretty good at first, with Schumacher courting Nicolas Cage to play the Scarecrow. And then this happened. Suddenly, Warner Brothers wasn't so sure another movie from the guy who thought Freeze in Hell, Batman was a good idea, and so Batman Unchained was quickly and quietly locked away for eternity. Here's a fun fact. Protasiewicz's script never saw the light of day, but he did go on to co-write another superhero movie, 2011's Thor. The Scarecrow eventually showed up as the bad guy in Christopher Nolan's Batman Begins, but we can't help but imagine what a Nick Cage Scarecrow would have looked like.
I couldn't think of a more horrible job if I wanted to.
Yep, would have been awesome. Okay, on to number 3. Batman Dark Knight? Batman Dark Knight? Batman Dark-Nigget? Yeah, I don't know how you're supposed to say that. In the wake of Joel Schumacher taking a giant ice cannon to the Bat franchise and the cancellation of Batman Unchained, Warner scrambled to find a new angle on one of their most lucrative properties. They got one from writers Lee Shapiro and Stephen Wise, who pitched the studio this unpronounceable idea that would have continued the Burton-Schumacher Bat continuity while branching off into a new direction, with a retired Batman and a Robin in college, where he battles with Professor Crane, aka Scarecrow. In this script, it's Robin who gets driven crazy and tossed in Arkham Asylum, and instead of Harley Quinn, the second villain was Man-Bat, who gets created in one of Scarecrow's mad experiments. Shapiro said in an interview that Dark Knight would have been the first movie in a trilogy and would have left all kinds of dangling plot threads to be continued in future sequels, with Scarecrow releasing the inmates in Arkham Asylum to pester the dynamic duo for years to come. Ultimately, though, Warner's decided continuing the previous franchise in any form was a bad idea, and what Batman really needed was a clean break from what came before, or at least a title that people could say out loud without total confusion. Either way, that's how we almost got the number 2 movie on our list. Batman Year One. The Batman franchise has been cribbing from artist Frank Miller's Batman comics right from the beginning, so it was inevitable that someone would eventually stumble on the idea of actually adapting one of his books to the screen. Around the turn of the century, Warner's brought in Darren Aronofsky to work with Miller on an adaptation of his graphic novel Batman Year One, the story of how Bruce Wayne took his first tentative steps into the world of vigilante crime fighting. As Miller would tell it years later, though, Aronofsky was less interested in faithfully recreating Miller's seminal Bat book and more keen to use its premise as the jumping-off point for the darkest Batman movie yet. As Aronofsky envisioned it, Bruce Wayne would abandon his family fortune in order to prove himself worthy of such an inheritance. He lives on the streets for a while, he travels the world, becoming the world's greatest detective and fighter. Miller once described the Year One screenplay as quote-unquote radical. So radical, in fact, that it would have been the first R-rated Batman movie. Which, as you might imagine, was an idea that went over at Warner Brothers like nipples on a batsuit. And so Year One was shelved too, along with a proposed Batman Beyond movie that was in development around the same time in the early 2000s. Eventually, we did get Christopher Nolan's Batman Begins, which features a fair number of variations on many of these ideas about Batman's origins. And we also got an animated version of Batman Year One. But not before Warner's tried one more idea, our number 1 Batman movie that never got made, Batman vs. Superman Asylum. That's right, a few years before Batman Begins, and over a decade before Batman vs. Superman Dawn of Justice, Warner Brothers brought in Seven screenwriter Andrew Kevin Walker to conceive a crossover movie that would bring together the Man of Steel and the Dark Knight, and would have been directed by Wolfgang Peterson. He envisioned an older Bruce Wayne, retired from crime fighting and about to get married, with his buddy Clark Kent serving as his best man at the wedding. After the Joker kills Bruce's wife on his honeymoon, he blames Superman, and the two Justice Leaguers square off for a while before they both inevitably realize that Lex Luthor's the guy pulling all the strings, and they decide to bury the hatchet and take him down. After Walker turned in his script, Warner's brought in Akiva Goldsman, the guy who wrote this line,
"My name is Freeze. Learn it well, for it's the chilling sound of your doom,"
to revise Walker's work, which was probably the beginning of the end for Asylum. Warner's eventually reassessed their plans and decided 2 big series were better than 1, and kept Supes and Bats separate, at least for the time being. Now in 2016, they're finally squaring off in Zack Snyder's new movie. And with all that extra time to plan and prepare, they've surely ironed out all the kinks. I mean, it's gonna be 100% awesome, right?
Do you bleed? You will.
For ScreenCrush, I'm Matt Singer. Thanks for watching, and for even more, make sure to subscribe, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and get the latest movie and TV news on ScreenCrush.com.